Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Oh man, I am super stoked about our guest that we are going to have on the airwaves. This is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you the specific, mystic, amazing truth behind many of the conspiracies and alternative fringe developments that our culture tends to overlook. But back to our guest, one of the best guys I've ever met, and possibly, well, I'll just be honest. I mean, he's like my best friend. So, kind of a big deal. And to have him on talking about something that is so important and emotionally relevant for his family, historically, and kind of a secret that's been passed along through the generations, having to do with something very important to America as a whole. We'll get into all this. It's going to be epic. If you haven't gone to Hero Paranormal, heroparanormal.com, checked us out on Hero Paranormal on social media, or checked out our research project, kind of a fun little thing we do on the side, which is turning out to be a pretty big little thing. It's spacewolfresearch.com. or Space Wolf Research on social media. You can also find it at SWR on Facebook. It is investigating the anomalies and the phenomena of the Uinta Basin near the epicenter of activity, an area known as the Shapeshifter Corridor in Shapeshifter territory. Definitely check it out. It's turning into a pretty massive project that we are having a hard time keeping our heads around. And in addition to that, definitely check out heroparanormal.com, and it's easily accessible on heroparanormal.podbean.com. It's not always that easy to play a video off of YouTube in your car, jumping on a plane, wherever you are. It can be insane. Get into something that's a little easier to download. I have this issue all the time because I'm a podcasting fanatic. I love to hear podcasts, and my favorites, the Higher Side Chats, Tinfoil Hat, Illuminati Watcher, Joe Rogan, Fade to Black, the list goes on and on ad infinitum, coast to coast, is always necessary in a lethal dose. And all of these, you can check these out in a more accessible format at podbean.com. Downloads quickly. You don't have to worry about playing video. If you're jumping on a plane, which is often the situation in my life, they download quick. By the time you're off the tarmac, you got your whole podcast downloaded. And you have something to enjoy that's actually like nutritionally, supplementally good for your brain the entire time you're flying, instead of watching the same movies, the same garbage that they're feeding you, sponsored by people you never met and never will meet. Instead, go where the heat's at. Hit the illumination, hit the fire, stoke the fire, get into knowledge and empowering yourself against the forces that you may not see. So, enough of that. Check out heroparanormal.com, spacewolfresearch.com, Hero Paranormal on Facebook, SWR on Facebook, which is also Space Wolf Research, and all the other podcasts that I mentioned. They're all worth your ear. Enough selfless glorification. Let's move on to what's important here, which is Pearl Harbor Day and the remembrance of Pearl Harbor Day. This is a very important day, not only for our nation, but for the world as a whole. This was a strategic attack that was placed on multiple countries, all having connections to the United States, in a display that is record-breaking. Complete annihilation and destruction on a level that had not been seen before, especially at this time period, historically. And we are here to discuss the things that just don't quite pass the smell test, not detracting from or taking away from the remembrance, the importance of our veterans, or any of the issues that we all hold so clear and dear to our heart. We're here to wholeheartedly delve into the back recesses of the mind, the things that make you go, why did that happen? Or why was this not spoken of? And there's a lot of them. As many of you know, and some of you may not know, Pearl Harbor was not the only point of attack. There were other countries and also other protectorates attacked at the same time with extreme loss of life. The remembrance of this horrific event, especially on this day, it's important to not lose track of that. And the loss of human life is really what's important here, and those that are here to protect it. It was also historic in a sense that this was the first and only time that the United States had been hit on territory which would be considered mainland at this point, or our own property. Never has this happened before since the Redcoats came storming and we sent them back with their tail between their legs. Now, the way we address this situation is not really what we're here to discuss. We're more here to discuss the events that took place on that day, and we have my very special, very best friend, great guy, Wil Hoffmann, a pastor, a all-around good guy, here to discuss it with us. So, Wil, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
It's good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain too much. Yeah, things are great. It's not as cold here as it is where you're at, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, we just had a little bit of snow this morning, and we're supposed to have a white Thanksgiving. So,
see, that's awesome because I always pray for a white Christmas, which doesn't happen very often, but it did last year. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. This is kind of in remembrance of Pearl Harbor Day, and we've only lightly spoken about just the idea of having a podcast about this, so this is all new to both of us. But we are going to discuss some events that pay respect to all the military and all that. In addition, we'll go into why some names are being excluded and things of that nature. But yeah, well, you have a very unique personal history, at least from a family standpoint, about some possibilities that may have happened at Pearl Harbor that it's a coincidental thing. There's some coincidences, as there oftentimes are with these major monumental historic events that take place in U.S. history, and this is one of those, much like 9/11 and the message that it conveyed. But could you tell us a little bit about that, Will?
Yeah. Well, my grandfather was in World War II, and he was a pilot. He was a medical pilot, and he never really talked about the war. I mean, this was the only story I actually heard come from his lips, and it was kind of in the later stages of his life. He came to Missouri to visit the family, and just out of nowhere, because we kind of asked him about, where he was at on the day Pearl Harbor happened, and he just goes into the story. And my grandfather at the time, he was stationed in California, and they were told that if anything was to ever happen in Hawaii, that they would be the first responders. Again, a lot of his career, he flew medical planes, so they would want to go over. And, being on the air base, wherever it was, I'm not for sure which air base they were at the time, I know they were close to a beach, and they always tried to ask their commanding officer if they could go to the beach for the day. And it was always, no, you can't go in case something happens. You got to be on station. Well, that Sunday morning, they went to their commanding officer and said, hey, can we go to the beach? And he just said, yeah, sure, go, have fun. And, being young men, they didn't think anything about it. They just thought this was their time to go to the beach. Go play volleyball, go play in the sand, do all that stuff. And about, I can't remember what time you said it was, but there was a radio, somebody had a radio on the beach, and the reports that the attack was taking place. And so they rushed back to base, started getting their planes ready, didn't even check in. They just went straight to their plane, started getting ready, and their commanding officer came out and told them to stand down. And they basically sat there and, kind of was asking why are you having us stand down? We're the first line, and they were just told, stand down. You'll get the order to go when we tell you to go. And they waited on base. They waited next to their planes for the rest of the day until they were told to go. And this was well after the attack already happened. It was, it was over, it was done. And then they were told, okay, now you can go. Then they really were the first ones that flew over and saw the destruction. And what my grandfather always said was, during this time when we were talking about it, because we're just being kind of blown away by this. His whole thing was, I never understood why they wouldn't let us go. Why they wouldn't let us go and try to save lives. We were the first line of support for help, and we were sitting by our planes. And it really just, it struck a nerve with him. As me and my mother are sitting there listening to this, we're just like, what? And he was told to stand down. He couldn't go save lives. And it was, it was hard for him. It's one of the things that kept him up at night. It was one of the things reason why he didn't talk about his time in the war. And it really affected him.
Wow. And, that could cause some serious PTSD.
He did suffer from that. The stories I heard from my mom, the night terrors that he would have, even when Saving Private Ryan came out, he was taken to the premiere of that. He got one of those premiere tickets because he was a serviceman during World War II, and even that set him off for a few months of reliving this stuff in his dreams. He saw a lot of stuff happen. He was, his plane was fired at, shot at. And yeah, it really affected him to the point where he didn't tell many stories. My mom can only recount, 2 or 3 stories that he would ever sit down and tell. And yeah, the Pearl Harbor story was one of them.
Seriously, not to be allowed to, go and being told to stand down. And I think it's important to mention that we'll get to this, but it's important to mention that this was afterwards, so after the attack had already taken place. And literally being the first line of support or defense, being young men and not really thinking anything about your orders, because you're just there to do that. There's just not be, them being allowed to go to the beach anyway, there's a lot of questions.
When he was telling me the story, I really didn't want to ask too many questions because, my grandfather was, and he's passed away, but he would always tell us stories. He would always come, he was one of those snowbirds. He lived in Arizona. He would come up to Missouri, during the summer, but spend most of his time in Arizona. And he would always tell us stories. That was kind of the thing. He would sit around the kitchen table and he'd just tell us stories about his life, about everything, but never that part of his life. So I didn't want to ask a lot of questions just because I didn't know when he would shut down. Sometimes when he just wouldn't want to talk about something, he would just shut down. When I'm listening to this, and I was I believe a teenager at the time. I'm kind of shocked at hearing this stuff, thinking, and even he said, I remember him saying very, very clearly that when they were told they could go to the beach, his first thought was, well, that's weird, but I'm going to do it because, I want to go to the beach. I want to, hang out and have fun. And, their first thought was, nothing's going to happen. But that was always one of those things it was just weird. That day was weird. That day on the base was weird when he woke up. Just how things were going. And then, getting permission to do something that they never could really do. Just getting that permission was, again, he would just say it was strange. It was weird.
Wow.
But they didn't think much about it until after the fact. And then, by after the fact, he was constantly, part of the war. That's what got us in. And he didn't really think much about it until after he came home.
Wow. So, you mentioned he'd always tell stories, and that he really never talked about this part of his life. You hearing this as a teenager, this part about them being teenagers, they want to go to the beach, have fun. They said it was a weird day. Is there any possibility after the fact and that, that it was after in his life? Could this be considered possibly when did he die after all of these stories? Could it have possibly been a deathbed confession?
Well, when I say he was later on in his life, he still lived. He probably lived another, I think, 10 years after telling this story. Maybe even a little bit longer. But it was just one of those moments where you ask somebody a story and you're expecting not to get an answer. Because again, when he would come, to the farmhouse, and he would tell stories. I knew pretty much every aspect of his life. His days of being a plane mechanic after the war, his time of being a TV repairman, all these other jobs that he had, working on the farm, everything. He would talk all about that. It just seemed to be like one of those times where you asked him the right question on the right day, and he told you the story. And that question, and I remember, my mom asked the question, where were you during Pearl Harbor? Kind of thinking, that was the time the time that got us into the war, but kind of before, might be an easier question for him to answer. And he just tells us this incredible story. So I don't necessarily think it was just a deathbed confession. I think it was just that right question, the right time, and he just opened up. And it was interesting because as soon as he was done telling the story, he was done. It was like a light switch went off and story time was over.
No question. Yeah. No questions afterwards, probably, because it was like, I told you what I told you type thing.
Yeah, that was kind of the feeling, was like, this is the one story you'll get of that time. And yeah, it made you think. It really, I remember the ride home. You know, me and my mom are sitting there just kind of going, what just happened? What did he just tell us? Because that was, you know, out of all the things I could say about my grandfather, I loved him. He was a great guy. He never lied. That was one of the things that he stood strongly with. And he was very blunt. He would tell you to your face about things. You know, if he didn't like something, he would tell you. If he liked it, he would tell you. If he thought you should do something, he would tell you blunt, honest truth. So this is the reason I never questioned his judgment on the story. That's why I've never questioned. I got a lot of other questions, not for him, but when he told me that story, there was never any reason I should ever think he was telling me a lie.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I mean, if he had a good track record and absolutely sincere, open confessions, it's neat that you said that if you ask him the right question at the right day, and he would just tell this, amazing story. So it wasn't a deathbed confession. That's kind of like, it was more of a, it wasn't like a realization. It was more of a truth in his mind. And you mentioned that he said that, I remember, and I could be out of place here, that there was reports that because they went to the beach, or something associated possibly with going to the beach, that the weapons were actually locked down.
Oh, okay. So, that's a whole nother story.
Oh man.
So I was actually in college, and one of my history professors, I believe it was her uncles, were stationed at Pearl Harbor during the attack. Mm-hmm. So, and again, this coincides with like the things that my grandpa was telling me.
Right.
But so her uncles were stationed at Pearl Harbor, the attack of Pearl Harbor, and they actually did survive. But again, they expressed how weird it was that day, and there was issues with the shipping lanes of how the boats were stacked in the harbor, which was wrong. But one of the key things is that they had an inspection that weekend, which never happened on the weekend. It just didn't happen. The weekend was the time where people went home. So you had these people, and again, at the time, a lot of people were going to church. They had church on one of the ships, I forget. And I remember one of the reasons he survived, my teacher's uncle, was because he forgot something in his bunk. I think he forgot his Bible or something like that. So he actually went back to his bunk to grab the Bible, and then the attacks happened. Well, one of the things you got to do during the inspection is you have to lock down the ammunition. You have to lock down the guns. Everything has to look spick and span. So when that time happened, and she's explaining this in a classroom. She has the blackboard. She's drawing us a diagram of what the harbor looked like. And she said, when the attack started happening and they started going to the guns, they couldn't find the keys. The keys were put away, and they couldn't get to the ammo. They couldn't get to the guns because everything was on lockdown for this like inspection that they had. So that was a big reason why they didn't have a lot of offense to shoot at the Japanese planes, was because they couldn't operate the guns. And it all of this, like, everything happened. If you believe in coincidences, everything happened perfectly, where it was just set up. That, the Japanese just picked the right time, the right day to bomb Pearl Harbor. But realistically, you look at it and you go, man, there's, where there's smoke, there's fire. And everything was just weird that day. And when you jump into the conspiracy theory realm, and, again, you're wanting to be respectful, you're wanting to remember what happened, remember those who lost their lives and stuff. But you just sit there and you add all this up and you go, man, either it was just the perfect scenario for the enemy, or there was something else at play. And yeah, it's I'll just say what my grandfather said. It was strange.
It's super strange to have. Do you know, like that? So much going on and so much at play, and I mean, there has to be some smoke to that conspiratorial fire. If there's other possibilities that it could be a spy or something, but more likely in my eyes, do you know, if you or your history teacher knew, how long did they actually have to stand down after the events took place? Do you remember how long the lockdown was?
All my grandfather would say was it was hours. And I mean, the people that were there, I know that, as she told us, that they were very active on trying to survive, trying to fight back. But I know my grandfather said it was just hours. He never really gave a time frame. But he just said by the time they got, because you got to go through all those checks. And that's what they were actually doing when they were told to stand down, was preparing the plane, going through the checks. So they had to go through all those checks again. They had to, make sure the planes were ready to go and then take off. And, he said, I'm thinking, and again, this is just trying to remember from years ago, that it was already starting to, be evening time by the time they got over there. And so, from the morning that it happened to, mid-afternoon into evening, it was done.
Man, and to be there and not be able to do anything for hours, if even an hour, that would have to be so consuming, just because you're just so riled up and ready to go. And I guess on the other hand, they may have not known if they were coming back for another hit, and you don't want to be kind of caught with your pants down, right? Like loading up and doing all that. But It's interesting that it seemed to have hit so quickly. They really didn't see it coming, and yet, I don't know. It's got an interesting history, and many other countries were also decimated, or areas, the Philippines and others. And historically, we really only hear about and are taught in our history lessons at school, elementary schools and such, that it was just Pearl Harbor. They leave the other stuff out usually, unless you're in a very intense historical discussion, pulling in files and records of, dates and times that are sporadic. But the loss of life, just if you account for it all, which took place all on the same day, it was like a multi-hit, 3 places, Guam, I believe, as well. So there were big time loss of life, big time. And to be hit that hard and not be able, I guess it was a strange attack because it pretty much did exactly what it was supposed to do. However, there's a conspiratorial aspect of this that does seem like there's some smoke and mirrors involved. Not only how it's viewed historically, how it functioned as an actual retaliation. When it came to retaliation, how there was a mechanical shutdown either on purpose or, if all the synchronicities in the universe were against everybody that day on being able to go to the beach, having their guns locked down in certain sectors, all kinds of stuff, just basically hands tied, pants down. Is it possible that the Japanese just knew about this? I mean, what's the coincidence in your eyes?
Man, I've looked into this for years, and I've looked at it every aspect. I've looked at the official records. I've looked at, the stories that were told to me by people that were there or people that heard it from people that were there, from my grandfather who was, just devastated when, I do remember, and I want to say this, that when they were told, hey, go, my grandfather didn't say this, but another guy in the squadron said, why? It's over. Just in that aspect of it's, apparently they were listening to reports, and it was just like, it's done. Why are we going now? Why are, and knowing that there were survivors and stuff like that, it was more the mentality of we could have saved more people if we left when we were supposed to.
Right.
But looking at all the records, and again, trying to be careful not to, hurt the memory of those who served during that time and who lost their life during that time, because it was devastating. But just knowing that all this stuff adding up, and knowing that there were spies who were calling, trying to get reports. What does the harbor look like and stuff like that. Trying to get like an idea of how to attack this thing. We know that there were spies doing this. We know that there were people calling, Japanese American people. That's why we, in a sense, as Americans, had a concentration camp for Japanese Americans. We didn't know exactly who we could trust, and I'm not saying that was right or wrong, but that's just fact. But we know that they were looking at this. They were doing their due diligence. They were studying the area. They were studying the situation, ready for this
stuff.
And
stuff that these days would be considered not politically correct.
Oh, yeah. And, so they were doing their stuff, but you also have to remember that the United States was in, we were going through a depression. We were going through hard times.
Yeah, it was this or we're done.
Yeah, it was, and they always say, what's the best way to get, America back on track? Well, you have a war. And it just seemed to be the thing that restarted our economy, restarted, the steel industry, all of this stuff. And you do have to ask yourself, were the higher ups in our government wanting this to happen, wanting us to be attacked? Because, we, at the time, we took a stand in saying that, we were with England, but even when Winston Churchill asked us to join, we said no. We were kind of like, we'll help, we'll give you weapons, we'll do all this stuff, but this hasn't really touched us, and we don't want to do this. And then as soon as it touches us, we were in. It's definitely a thing to study and a thing to look at. But again, if you're going to study and you're going to look at it, you need to come from it from all sides.
Definitely. And you mentioned that he was kind of a snowbird, and you, like, when you did see him and you were a teenager and you were hearing these stories, this had to be a pretty magical experience, being told these type of things, hearing other people give confirmation of the same.
Well, I mean, as they say, the history is written by the victors, and when you start to look into history, and I mean, I love American history. I really like early American history. The Revolutionary War, stuff like that. But when you look at this stuff, when you actually dig into like the actual facts, and again, I think the best way to come at any argument is not just knowing one side. You have to know all the sides. And you just look into it and you read the things that you may not even agree with, but read those things so that you know what the other side was. And you'll find a lot of times that the truth lies in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So, when it comes to what I learned in, elementary school, middle school, high school, again, we were always told that Christopher Columbus came to America. And we know now that that's not true. He didn't found it. The history is stating more so that the Vikings were here before he was. And you sit there and you say, when we find more evidence, when we find more truths, we can build a better reality of what history was. And I think even with Pearl Harbor, and I mean, you can even look at more recent events in our country and in our world. Not everything is reported, and especially with our media today, you're only going to get one side. So you have to study. You have to do your own research. You have to ask questions. When we asked my grandfather this question, I didn't know. The answer could have been I was in California, and that was it. But he goes and he tells us the entire day. And again, from the stories I know, what my grandfather went and did in World War II, this was the only story he ever told me face to face. And yeah, I love history, and I love discovering new things about history.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that, this has given you a totally different idea of, history and how it's written to us and how things have changed, how something that now would be political, almost martial law at this point, to be able to get away with doing something like that, causing a concentration camp for a specific, gender or race. And so things have changed. And who discovered America with Christopher Columbus, it's like, it's not so much who found it. It was almost like most recently plundered. Being able to have the military might to plant a flag in the ground of another. And that part sort of hasn't changed.
Yeah. Knowing how proudly my grandfather served, and knowing how the rest of my family had served. I've had, other family members that have served. And I did actually have the pleasure to preside over my grandfather's military funeral, which was very important to me in my life. To be standing in front of my family and, and proceeding over, I've done many funerals in my day, as pastor, but just doing this one and being able to look at my family and say, out of all the things, my grandfather loved his family. He stood up for his family. He was a truthful man, and he was an honorable man. And knowing that these events, Pearl Harbor, other stories that I've heard secondhand from my aunts and my uncles of him in the war, this was the thing that this was what really wanted him to serve more. This was the thing that drove him. He had a love for airplanes. He loved flying. He went on to work for McDonnell Douglas, and that it drove his life. A very dark time in his life, one he didn't talk about, drove his life, and it shaped my family. It shaped me. And I do wish that he would have been able to open up more, but I know it just haunted him. And Pearl Harbor was a day that did definitely haunt him.
It is one of those days that just, when it's mentioned, it's a day that lives in infamy. Since, truly from an outside army and force. So this was pretty scary.
It was. It allowed our country to understand that someone can reach out and touch us, and unfortunately, we've seen that happen again and again. And it should give us a perspective here in the States to understand that, I think sometimes we as Americans have gotten a big head, and we thought we were untouchable. And we can tell from D-Day and from Pearl Harbor, all those events, even 9/11, that America can have a loss, and sometimes we get too comfortable, and I do fear that we've gotten into a state of comfort again, where the next attack could be around the corner. And unfortunately, I think right now our government is too concerned with trivial issues that we're not looking at at what can attack us. We're too busy fighting amongst ourselves for petty things, trying to figure out who's right, who's wrong, and that's usually when we get attacked.
It's true. That is true. It wants to be remembered as it's remembered, and yet even you wonder sometimes, is even that possibly a little bit of a manipulation of our mindset, because sometimes we're kind of told what to believe. But this specific idea I'm 100% with. We got hit hard, and we got hit at home. Do you remember a significant loss of life that he spoke of, which he witnessed himself?
No, he mentioned when he flew over, he just saw smoke and fire. By that time, and I wish I knew my. I never really studied World War II all that much. Just really Pearl Harbor, and I haven't even studied that for a while. But knowing that you have, ships that have sunk with people aboard that were still alive, but they couldn't get them out. Things of that. He just said he was able to look down and he just saw smoke and fire. And he just knew that more than likely he was going to be bringing bodies back instead of people, well, there's still people, but he was going to be bringing back the dead instead of the living. His main job was he would fly. He was a medical plane. So his job was to fly in to war zones and to pick up the wounded, to pick up the dead. And sometimes it was while the fight was going on, he was being shot at, he would land, load up what he could, and fly off. So that was what he was prepared for. But he just saw smoke and fire. And he just knew that there was going to be more dead than alive. And I don't remember the numbers and stuff, but that was his initial view when flying over.
There are a lot of coincidences that took place, and at the end of the day, it's hardly any of the survivors are still alive.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to note that, think about that day. It was a Sunday morning. During that time in our country, where were most people at on Sunday mornings? They were in church. Our country was very different back then. Stores, most restaurants, all those were closed. It was quiet. So, you do have to give it to the enemy, Japan at the time, that they probably knew this. They probably knew that, Sunday morning rolls around, you'll have some people on watch, but a lot of people are going to church during that time. And a lot of that time, especially in the harbor, churches were located within the ships. So they would have a chapel. So, you would have a lot of people all in one area at one time. And yeah, but I still, looking at how the harbor was set up, how there was a traffic jam of ships inside the harbor during that day, during that weekend. Again, a lot of things that shouldn't have happened did happen. Was it just the perfect setup for Japan, or was there something else working? The speculations are out there, the conspiracy are out there, but it happened.
I am mesmerized by the coincidences, the synchronicities, and the odd, like you said, the things that shouldn't have happened that happened. They hit us when we were most spiritually vulnerable, made us realize they knew exactly what was going on in the mind of their enemy when they hit them. It's like getting hit by a samurai force, literally.
Yeah. That the tagline that we have for 9/11, never forget. That needs to be a tagline on a lot of things. Never forget, Pearl Harbor. Never forget our servicemen and women who have served, who have given their life, and those who, in other ways that, served but came home with PTSD. Those who have struggled. I have cousins who, have been part of some of the biggest events in our country in the past, 30, 40 years. And it has really, shaped the way they think, the way things happen. We should never forget, and we should always stand behind our military. They gave their lives. And then also taking the time to, pray for our government, pray for those who are, being the public service. And, and this might be a pretty strong statement here, but, even taking the time to pray for those that you don't necessarily agree with. But I believe there is something wrong with assuming everything that you're told is true. Do not believe this will not be the last time we will be attacked on our homeland. That just comes from if it's going to be from an outside source or an inside.
Pearl Harbor is a day that will live in infamy, but thanks so much for taking the time out of your day and, well, just being so knowledgeable about everything we're talking about. And Wil, what can you tell our guests? How can they stay in touch with you if they have something to tell you, or anything in between?
You can always go to the Hero Paranormal site. You can always contact me through you as well.
Sure.
If somebody wants to talk to me, feel free. If you look hard enough, you can find me. I'll put it like that.
Well, thanks so much, man. It's a pleasure to speak with you finally at length about this, and it's so fascinating, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
It was a pleasure, and I hope you have a blessed day.
Delivering the goods, Mr. Wil Hoffmann, right from Missouri. And appreciate everybody listening in tonight. Wil is a member of the Hero team. If you need to get a hold of him, just go to heroparanormal.com, shoot us a message. You can also shoot us a message on social media at Facebook as well. Also, while you're at it, check out heroparanormal.com and browse around. You can get the archives there. Also, go like and subscribe on YouTube at Hero Paranormal. We are happy to bring you the less known fringe elements of culture and society. Thanks for listening in. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off.